Christmas morning of 2012, seeing as this was about 12 years ago. I can't remember every detail, but I'll try my best to explain everything that happened. Ever since I was very young, I lived with my aunt and uncle throughout my childhood. Long story short, my mom was a major meth head, and my dad spent a long time in jail because of that. They were in no position to raise a kid, and that was why I went to live with my extended family. Ever since then, I felt happier around them, where they actually cared for me and my well-being anyway. It was Christmas morning, and me being the excited 6-year-old, I went out into the living room. Stocked under the tree were a bunch of presents and gifts. It was a child's dream come true at that point in time. I ran to my aunt and uncle's room and wake them up to tell them that Santa had come, as tired as they were. They sucked it up and came out to watch me open my presents and just appreciating the Christmas spirit. I'd say it took us a full hour to open all of the presents before cleaning up all of the open wrapping paper and other trash. As I was holding the trash bag open, I thought I could see something from the corner of my eye by the stairs. That's when I look over and see 2 pairs of shoes walking upstairs, being only 6. I could only assume it was Santa, and I dropped my bag and ran towards the stairs. I remember just looking up at the top of the stairs. When my aunt asked me what I was looking at, I just responded with Sansa and pointed up the stairs. This made my aunt and uncle laughed off as me being imaginative or trying to be funny. And some way my aunt comes over to me and grabs me by the hand, and then looks up at the stairs when she saw it. At the top of the stairs in the guest bedroom was someone hiding behind the door. The room upstairs was dark, so she couldn't tell if it was a man or a woman. My aunt yelled loudly and instructed my uncle to contact the police. This caused me to start crying, as I didn't understand what was going on at the time. According to my aunt, whoever was up there didn't bother trying to run and just sort of stayed where they were. Hiding our neighborhood was located not too far from a police station, so they were able to get here pretty quickly. However, in similar situations like this, whoever we saw upstairs was gone. He got away with it scot-free. We always kept our doors locked at all times, so it would be extremely difficult for someone to just break in. Like that, mind you, we had a dog too, so the fact that he didn't sense that someone else was in the house made the situation even more weird. This made my aunt and uncle believe that whoever was in our house was someone we knew. We almost never used the upstairs, as it was only for guests or for company staying over. My aunt had some valuable stuff in the closet of that room, nearly $5,000 worth of stuff, and most of it had been taken. Police had found no evidence as to who it might have been, and we aren't sure as to how they got away. My uncle believes it had to be through the upstairs window, but that hasn't been confirmed nor denied. 2 weeks later, my uncle went upstairs to replace a pipe that seemed to be leaking. While upstairs in one of the closets, he discovered 6 kitchen knives stabbed into the wall, along with a sleeping bag and numerous food wrappers. This was alarming. Whoever was in the sleeping bag belonged to my uncle, and they had been living in our house for a very long time. They had also been eating our food, which is why we were suspicious of how quickly our food was going missing. My aunt and uncle think it might have been someone we knew, but I think it might have been a squatter looking for shelter. That would explain why they had been staying in the house and eating our food. We haven't seen them since, and I'll never forget what happened that Christmas. Just to give a little background information, I grew up in the deep rural South where almost all of labor was seasonal. There was always many Hispanic families blowing through the town during the seasons, usually harvesting related. They would get to town and fill absolutely every rental and open every property in town. The economy would literally boom for 3 months straight, maybe even 4. Then the cycle would shift once again. These families would pass through generally 2 or 3 times a year before the winter hit. And then they all moved on. The harvesting and agricultural work dried up with the winter change, and so did our buzzing little economy. So around Christmas time, in the late 80s and early 90s, me, my cousins, and all my friends are having a sleepover at one of my friend's house during one of our rare snowstorms. This particular friend's dad was ex-military, had a pretty cool collection of surplus gear, namely a pair of night vision goggles. This was one of the reasons we like to conglomerate at his house. There's just always cool to play with. As I explained before, this is the deep South in the middle of winter, So as you can imagine, there's even less to do than normal, especially for a bunch of kids that can't even drive. We went and manned the windows, so one could look out at the snowfall. I think we were playing something akin to Army Base, so we were pretending to be scouts or lookouts, and we called for an approaching enemy. Then someone would hand the goggles over to us. It was a fun way to share the coolest toy we were allowed to play with, and also keep us entertained. It felt like we were on a special mission, and every movement counted. Also, the snow and surrounding woodland looked unbelievable, way cooler than it does in the movies. You can literally see everything in motion. That's when we noticed something strange, consistent movement coming from the nearest neighboring house. Now this house had been abandoned for a couple of months at the time. As we all knew the family that had moved, we don't know exactly what happened, but suddenly they were getting out of town, ASAP. Probably something to do with the wishy-washy economy either way. Even the kids of the family that went to school just disappeared one day. And that was that no one ever moved in no for sale sign, just a big, empty kind of creepy house in the corner. This house in the moment doesn't appear abandoned, faintly, and only with the help of the night vision goggles. We could see a light on in the attic. It almost appeared to be wavering or dying, maybe turning on and off. There's just something inconsistent about how reads through the goggles. We took turns passing them around, trying to guess what we were all seeing. So as a group of teenagers tend to do, we decided we need to investigate. We went to the mudroom and started layering up on our warmest clothes for the mission at hand. Flannels, denims, coats, and then an outer shell, black gloves and beanies came last to keep us hidden in the dark. We felt like this little paramilitary unit. Although the truth is, if anything decided to kill us, there wouldn't have been we could do to stop it. We were barely 12 years old at the time we navigated the woodland rather than use the road. This made us feel even cooler, kept us out of sight of any potential watchman. I think we all believed there was going to be an enemy or a great mystery, so we decided we needed to sneak up on it. Sure enough, we step onto the property, and there's definitely a light on the attic. It's a candle flickering back and forth beyond the single slat window that we can see through the wavering of the flame was what made it inconsistent through the NVGs. If it blew too hard, it almost looked like it went out. We stood there in the cold and just stared clearly. There was someone inside of this abandoned house, someone who probably shouldn't be in there. There wasn't a chance of any of us getting any closer to the house to actually look around. We knew the porch to be creaky would give away our position. We slunk back into the tree line and just watched for a bit. Chased what the slender shadows we could see moving around in the attic up there. After a while, the chill got us. We retreated back to the house, where we continued to monitor with the night vision goggles until we had to go to bed. We agreed we'd investigate for real when the sun was up the next morning. We all trekked back over to the house and, not seeing any more light from the attic, made our way inside. This was easier than it should have been, but as mentioned, we knew that kid used to live there. He showed us the loose windows and doors that failed to latch. We slipped in without much noise and closed everything behind us, and then waited. We wanted to make sure no one saw us come in. After a few minutes, silence began to look around as expected. The house was completely cleared out, no furniture, no decor, nothing. There stains on the walls from where the pictures had been hanging. The drawers and cupboards were totally empty. There wasn't any evidence of a squatter, vagrant, or serial killer. There's only one place left to look. Now, this could have been just us teenagers having an overactive imagination, but I swear that when we pulled open the trapdoor to the attic, a cold wind rushed past us. Everyone from the front of the line to the back felt it, which is why I still don't deny that it happened. This wasn't the most unbelievable part, though. As we climbed up into that attic, we noticed it was just as barren as the rest of the house, save for the one central feature. There in the middle of the attic was a bloody sacrificed lamb, nailed to a crucifix. Those of us in the lead that actually got into the attic had a full meltdown, screaming, backpedaling, trying to get away from the carnage. The smell was horrendous, and there at the foot of the crucifix were a pair of burnt-out candles. We ran back down the ladder, then down the hall, and barreled through any manner of exit that we saw fit. No one bothered to close anything behind them. After that, we made a tear through the thicket and back to our friend's house. We went straight to his dad and told him this is the same military dad with all the badass equipment. We were actually elated. It was him that we got to tell. No one was more prepared than the guy with the machine guns and night vision goggles. He didn't really have the reaction that we wanted, though. He laughed and told us to just carry on. It was only after 20 minutes of breathless pleading that he actually started to listen. We went over it as detailed as possible from last night until now of exactly what we'd seen. Our friend's dad tucked a pistol into his waistband and then wandered over to the property. He poked around for a minute before he came hustling back and called the police. There's a big story, a big report, and it never went anywhere. Like I said, at the beginning, because of the nature of the town we lived in, there was always weird people rolling through, which meant weird was always happening in the South. We also had the misfortune of having our law enforcement caught up with a tail end of the satanic panic, so they didn't really have the urge to get to the bottom of it. My cousin says he thinks maybe it had something to do with the weird sect of Catholicism or something, but the scariest part to us is that we almost went into the house during whatever ritual was taking place. It could have been us nailed to that crucifix. I'm a 30-something mother of 3, and this happened on Christmas Eve of last year. My boyfriend and I had broken up about this time for reasons I won't discuss, but it was for the best. As a quick aside, I had been in a number of toxic relationships before, but none nearly as bad as this one. I had 3 boys, ages 14, 7, and 9. My oldest, who is 14, had assisted me that evening in wrapping gifts for his siblings because it was already difficult enough for me. For the sake of the narrative, I'll call him being a mother. Jake knew how difficult it was to prepare gifts by yourself, especially in such a short period of time. It was 2 a.m., and while I was setting down the last item, my oldest and I had just completed wrapping presents and were getting ready for bed. Jake taps me and points to the living room window. Seeing that it was pitch dark out, I couldn't see anything but the faint snow outside. It wasn't until I looked a bit closer that I noticed what appeared to be a dark figure peering into the window. I took a step back in horror when I came to the realization that there was someone watching. Ingus. I'm not sure how my son saw him, but I'm glad he pointed it out. Nonetheless, growing up, I was always taught how to deal with situations like this. I didn't freak out or anything, but I figured I'd use a more constructive approach to deal with it. I go outside with my son behind me and straight up tell the person to please leave, and that they had no business being here. By this point, I was able to see that this person was actually a woman. However, there was something clearly off about her that made my son and I both feel really uneasy. We weren't sure as to what it was, but if we had to say, it had to be her eyes. She then plays stupid and begins to apologize and said that she was just trying to scare her friend. She then claimed that she had the wrong house and then went on her way, constantly staring back. That was the last we ever saw of her. But my son was always skeptical about what her actual intentions were.